Unfortunately, a no from the NHS is very common.
Yeah.
Even when somebody should qualify or it's clear they should qualify, the key is understanding your rights and the appeal process and how to present your case in the best possible way to give you the best chance of a positive outcome. Sometimes you simply just have a couple of sentences saying this person doesn't have a primary health need, no nature, no intensity, no complexity, no unpredictability. That's not enough.
Think about what that person's like on their worst day, for example.
Don't be sidetracked with things like the quality of care, which I know is difficult for families because everything seems to intertwine together, but prepare and stick to the facts.
You have got rights. If it's for your own care package or for a relative's care package, just make sure that you've got the right preparation and you can succeed. Welcome back to Understanding Care Funding. I'm Lisa. I'm a partner and head of the nursing care department at Hugh James. And with me today is my colleague Michelle, who's a legal director in the department. Today we're going to be talking about what happens if you've gone through the continuing healthcare assessment process and you've been told that your relative is not eligible for continuing healthcare. I suppose first thing to say is don't panic. We're going to walk you through it today, what you should do next.
That's right, Lisa. Unfortunately, a no from the NHS is very common.
Yeah.
Even when somebody should qualify or it's clear they should qualify, the key is understanding your rights and the appeal process and how to present your case in the best possible way to give you the best chance of a positive outcome.
Yeah. So let's start with that dreaded letter, but like we said, is quite common, that says you're not eligible for funding. So what exactly are families looking out for?
So, as Lisa said, you should get a formal letter, and hopefully within that letter, you'll have a copy of the completed assessment, the decision support tool assessment that we discussed in the last podcast. Now, what you should start with is review that assessment in detail. So, what was agreed in each care domain? Does that reflect the discussion that took place during the assessment, or have things changed? Do you agree with that description, those descriptions? Do they accurately describe your relative's needs? Have they given clear reasons why they've chosen the level of needs that they have chosen under the different domains? And have they actually applied those key characteristics that we discussed last time of nature, intensity, complexity, and unpredictability? Sometimes you simply just have a couple of sentences saying, this person doesn't have a primary health need, no nature, no intensity, no complexity, no unpredictability. That's not enough. They have to give full rationale and reasons for their findings.
So if something doesn't feel right, is that enough to challenge the decision?
It can be. Many successful appeals have hinged on the assessment being poor quality, procedural errors, as we talked about before, such as there not being a full multidisciplinary team, or that the DST itself simply doesn't reflect the individual's needs.
So I suppose what we want to do now is just try and hold someone's hand to go through the process. So step by step, what is your first step if you're not happy with the outcome?
So step one is to challenge the assessment itself. So we've got the outcome letter, which tells us the patient has been found not eligible. Your 6 months, generally 6 months starts from the date of that letter. So you have to make sure that you're letting them know that you want to appeal and providing your reasons within that 6 months.
And I suppose it's important to highlight that in Wales it's actually 28 days, not 6 months.
Yeah, so much tighter timeframes in Wales. But if we move forward, we'll generally discuss what the English system is.
Yeah.
So the first step is to appeal within that 6 months and request that the appeals process be invoked. And the first step in that usually is for the Integrated Care Board to hold what's called a local resolution meeting, an LRM, or sometimes it's called a local appeal panel. But this is a first stage appeal meeting.
And that's more of an informal meeting, isn't it? So it's supposed to be informal, and it's a chance for you to explain what you feel's gone wrong with the
Yeah,
assessment. And you can bring evidence to that meeting, can't
yeah,
you? Like medical records, care records, like we discussed in the last episode. But also testimony, isn't it, from care staff, and what you feel, what a typical day is like for your loved ones.
yeah,
So that it's, it can't just be, that assessment can't be just that snapshot on that day. Think about what that person's like on their worst day, for example, because if they have gone on a very good day, that it's not fair to just consider that.
no,
um so make sure that you're calm, you're prepared, and you're focusing on the needs. And we know that's very difficult when it comes to someone that your loved one. But try not to become emotionally upset in the meeting, and just be be calm, be prepared, and focus on your loved one's needs. So what if the NHS, so in that meeting, they have an opportunity also to explain why the NHS made that decision. So what if the NHS then sticks with their original decision?
which is again is not uncommon, because at this stage they're asked to review and consider their decision again. Well, it's their decision, so there isn't much incentive for them to change that. But if they don't change it, then you can escalate to the next stage of the appeals process, and that is to ask for an independent review panel, or an IRP. Now, this is run by NHS England, and it includes an independent lay chairperson, a nurse, and a social worker from outside your area. So they will be completely independent. They will not have had any prior involvement with your loved one's care or the decision previously. This meeting is a more formal meeting. It reviews the process that's been followed by the health authorities. So have they done everything correctly? But it also looks at the individual's needs against the criteria afresh as such. So they look at what the health authority has assessed them as having. They look at what the appeal says, so any dispute, and then they make their mind up as to which option they go with, or they go down another option. They're not bound by anything previously.
And again, it's important that once you get that local resolution meetings decision, you then have another 6 months to challenge. So again, the time is ticking, and it's important that you act promptly to make sure that you don't miss any deadlines in which to challenge those decisions. But we'll most probably go through an independent review panel in another episode to kind of fully get people prepared for that meeting. So I suppose the next thing is what do we see? What kinds of errors are most common in these the unsuccessful CHC decisions that we see? So,
Yeah.
what's some of the frequent issues? I
Yeah.
mean,
So
one
there's
for
there's
me
quite a
is,
lot.
yeah, there are a lot. I suppose one thing is, we see all the time, unfortunately, is that missing or inaccurate evidence is now within the decision support tool. And that's where those records are very important, because they are your contemporaneous evidence to demonstrate why you feel that someone's needs should be higher in a certain domain.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that's why it's important to ensure the right people are involved in the assessment, because often you will be participating in a decision support tool assessment with care plans saying one thing, and then the individual sort of key worker saying the complete opposite. And that's very difficult then to evidence when you're looking at documentary evidence. So it's important to make sure that you have got accurate evidence and things do reflect the individual.
Yeah, and that will lead to then the misapplication of the levels, won't it,
Yeah,
within the each care domain. So, and like we said in the previous episode, it is so subjective, and that's why there is room to challenge. Even if there is no missing information, there can be room to challenge those assessments.
yeah,
And again, what you said in the last episode about the fact that this is not a scoring tool, and it is there to gather all the information, and there has to then be reference at the end going through the primary health need approach, which is the 4 key indicators that we discussed. And if there is no reference to that, that is again a
ground to
reason to
challenge.
challenge that decision.
And with respect to those characteristics, often one of the things we see is they've been too restrictively applied. So, you for an example of that would be they may say an individual hasn't qualified because they're in a residential home, or they may say that they're not eligible because they don't need specialist intervention. And those are things that aren't supposed to be considered. They're prohibited under the framework. So if you've got things like that in your rationale for why somebody's been found not eligible, again, they are things that's a common thing that we would see and we would challenge.
And a failure to take into account the family as well, isn't it? Their views. Like we always say, the family are in such a unique position because they visit regularly, they know what their loved ones' health needs are and their difficulties, and it's so important that their views are taken into account, and the national framework says that too. So it is important that their views are looked at. And I suppose the other point is that decision shouldn't be predetermined by budget. Ultimately, NHS continuing healthcare means that the NHS has to fund for that individual's care fees, whether that is at home or in a nursing home, and that decision can't be predetermined by budget concerns, and that is clear within the national framework too. So I suppose when a family are looking at this decision support tool, and they can see, one severe or a combination of highs and severes, or highs and moderates, they might still qualify for funding, mightn't they?
Absolutely, as we said in the last episode, it's not a scoring tool, it's not a tick box exercise. It is about the overall needs and the totality of those needs, and looking at whether or not somebody has a primary health need. Often multidisciplinary teams are simply looking for those 1 priority, 2 severe levels that would indicate eligibility, and they don't really properly consider those that have scored below that, which they should do.
So, what are your top tips for preparing then for? I mean, we do this day in, day out, and we have
Yeah,
done for, I wouldn't
many
like to say
years.
how many years. It will show our
Yeah,
age.
that
Um, but
we can't.
what are your top tips
Yeah,
then
we
for
can't
strong appeal?
keep saying this is evidence. So you need to get full records, so any relevant records. So if somebody's in a care home, you need your care home records, your GP records, if they've been in hospital, hospital discharge summaries, any other records that you feel might be relevant. As Lisa mentioned previously, if your loved one, for example, is suffering from something like Parkinson's disease and is having regular input from the Parkinson's nurse, you should look at getting those records if they're not included in the GP records. Um, Once you've got those records in, you need to obviously go through them, review them, and summarise your own analysis of those records into the domains of the decision support tool. Go through the national framework and the decision support tools, and reference parts of those that that are helpful in preparing your appeal. So, for example, if they are relying on, for example, the setting of care or the diagnosis, there's parts of the framework that will help you to say that to evidence that that's not the right thing to do. Don't rush it. Don't become too emotional. Don't be sidetracked with things like the quality of care, which I know is difficult for families because everything seems to intertwine together, but prepare and stick to the facts. And finally, really consider getting legal support. People like us, we do this day in, day out, and this is a complex area, and it is very emotional for families as well. So the legal support can remove some of that emotion as well and help you feel more confident.
Yeah, and some people do say why, your legal profession, why, should, this is a health decision, but ultimately this is a dispute resolution process, isn't it?
Yeah,
We are trained in the skills to gather the evidence, analyze evidence, and present it. We are very well versed in what continuing healthcare is. We know what they should be looking at, what they shouldn't be looking at. We've got a huge amount of experience, and that is respected by especially the independent review panels, because a lot of the chairs are former barristers, aren't they, or former solicitors. So we are very well versed in and the skills that we have is very well suited to this work. And I suppose our experience, is our reputation goes before us in, the cases that we are overturning, and the years of experience that we've got, and the amount of money that we have recovered for families, which is around, well, we've now hit what, 250 million pounds from recovered now for families, and
that,
that's money that
yeah,
should
shouldn't
not
be
have
paid
been
in the
paid in the
first
first
place.
place, unfortunately.
And that does go
um
to show that these cases can be overturned, and these appeals can be won. You just need the right strategy and support, and that can involve legal support as well.
Yeah, and and sometimes, this is outside of people's comfort zone. It is complicated. It's not straightforward, unfortunately. It is bureaucratic, and it can feel very overwhelming, rushed, sometimes biased, confusing, and a lot of pressure is put on families during this process. We've got a number of clients that will confess to that. So families, people don't have to do this alone. We appreciate you've got a lot on your plate. And you can win, and we've demonstrated that.